The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 42. Colourless. Poppy continued to stare at the magenta wall of her pod and let out a defeated sigh. The partial apple she had eaten earlier felt heavy in her stomach, like she had devoured an entire cake with triple icing. She languidly glanced at her yellow flower-shaped clock. 11:36 a.m. Over an hour and a half since she had gotten out of bed. More accurately, since she was rudely awakened by that nightmare. 3 weeks. Only 3 weeks since she had lost her colours. She couldn't even remember the last time she laughed or smiled. It felt like years ago. Poppy let out another sigh. An exasperated one this time. She was getting a nasty cramp in her back, and both her legs were asleep. She needed to stand up. The Grey Queen managed to get to her feet, but it took every bit of her energy. After stretching out her back and legs, Poppy decided she might as well take an unenthusiastic stroll around her pod. She was bored out of her mind, yet she still didn't feel like doing anything, which made zero sense. Then again, none of my emotions make much sense lately. Poppy passed her main dresser first. She scanned all her colourful accessories and decorations. She tried to feel some joy at the sight of them. She really tried, but couldn't muster even a tiniest spark. There was the photo of her in the middle of the snack pack, her with her enormous smile and bright pink features. It was like looking at a stranger. How could that happy troll in the photo and this grey troll be the same person? Then Poppy spotted that little purple vintage box, and had abruptly looked away in the opposite direction, so quickly it almost hurt her neck. She couldn't look at that box, or touch it, or even think about it. That beautiful, special rose necklace inside made her want to burst into tears and cry for an hour straight. And she couldn't even explain why it made her so sad. It just did. Next, Poppy walked by her closet, full of dozens of brightly coloured outfits, from simple casuals to fancy formals. But their lovely designs and cute flowery patterns had no effect on the hollow numbness inside her. There was also the big basket of unopened cards. She stared at the colourful envelopes for a minute, reading the ones that were facing up. "Dearest Queen Poppy," in neat cursive, "To Queen Poppy, our hero," in a child's messy writing. "Queen Poppy XOXO," in a sparkly text with a bunch of stickers. "Sunshine Time, a sunny haiku," in thick, large letters with a drawing of a happy sun. Finally, Poppy turned away without touching any of them. She wanted those sweet letters and cards to bring her happiness, but somehow they could only increase her sadness. Eventually, Poppy approached her other dresser. There was her purple hug time bracelet, collecting dust. It hadn't moved a millimetre since Branch set it there, after she abandoned it on her first night as a colourless troll. Beside it was her flowery and leafy crown. She had moved it from her table to her dresser, but other than that, she had not gone near it. She refused to touch either of those items. Wearing her hug time bracelet was wrong. She could not offer or accept hugs. Wearing her headband was inappropriate. She was not behaving like a queen, so she was not worthy of the crown. On the edge of the dresser was her stereo, loaded with all her favourite songs. That is, what was her favourite. Poppy couldn't care less about music now. Listening to it, singing or dancing along, not even humming or bopping her head. All she longed for was silence, musical tones. Even the best ones were like nails on a chalkboard. She had given it a try a few times, and finally tried again today, She hit the play button. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Poppy clapped only twice. The first sloppily, the second very sloppily. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like happiness is. She switched the song, hoping a different one would spark some motivation, or joy, or contentedness, or any hint of something positive. Next was the Macarena, the classic tune that makes it impossible to stand still. Poppy tried nodding along, but it was more of a lazy sway that didn't match the music at all. So she lifted one light grey foot, but instead of tapping her toes to the music, she let it drop back down to the floor with a clunk. Nope, nothing. Even as the energetic bop picked up, Poppy stood as still as a statue. So she tried another song. When the working day is drawn, oh trolls, they wanna have fun. The song had been her favourite since she was a kid. Side note, it's one of mine too, since I was a child. She tried to hum along. But she was so out of tune it was an ear sore. With a huff of defeat, Poppy roughly pressed the pause button. Those little bits of uplifting songs did nothing to make her feel better. If anything, they irritated her, making her feel like boiling water was sloshing in her belly. Turning her back on her dresser, she moved on to her craft table. Supplies all over the place, some organised and some scattered. Several in-progress projects, including a half-finished scrapbook page, a nice poster that was lacking crucial glitter accents, and a pile of invitations for one of many parties that got cancelled after the flood. Poppy picked up a random piece of green paper, then set it back down. Then she picked up a purple glitter bottle, studied it for a moment, then tossed it into its drawer. As she slammed it shut, the movement disrupted the invitation pile, and half of them scattered onto the floor. Poppy groaned and went to pick them up and return them to the desk. But most she left on the floor. She was almost finished with the mundane tour of her pod. Lastly was her kitchen. As usual, she kept all her curtains closed, giving the whole vibrant pod a shadowy overlay. She peeked in the fridge, and, sure enough, Branch had all her meals for the day ready. A small bowl of tomato soup for lunch, a small plate with a handful of mashed potatoes, and a skimpy pile of coleslaw for dinner, and a skinny slice of strawberry shortcake just in case she felt for some dessert. The sink and counters were spotless. Branch never left her any mess, partly because he knew she didn't have the energy to clean up her own pod, and partly because he knew untidiness made her anxiety worse. Poppy had been trying to ignore how her dresses were getting looser on her. Everyone else had noticed. Her friends, her dad, her boyfriend. But none of them made any direct comments. She saw it in their eyes, though. The way they looked at her with a mixture of concern and pity. She knew she needed to start eating better, but she also didn't care. Eating made her feel sick, and she already felt sick enough as it was. So, why the bother eating? As she approached her dining table, there was a knock. Probably Branch. "Come in," was her emotionless greeting. Sure enough, her turquoise boyfriend stepped in and gave her a much friendlier greeting. "Hey, sweetheart. What are you up to?" She shrugged. "Nothing, really. Just wandering around." With his clipboard in hand, Branch gave her another update on the village's progress. "The final markers for the fun factory have been set, and all the trees and rocks have been cleared away. So we should be able to start constructing the foundation by the weekend. Larry and I have a final few tweaks in the design to discuss with Sky. Several groups of trolls are scouring the forest to find materials to restock supplies and get the factory back on its feet. It will take at least a year to engineer all the necessary machinery, but we're making steady progress on the building itself. so the basic functions should be partially up and running by spring. That ancient weeping willow in the northeast is large enough for all the junior trollings to fit under, so they can continue their education in a set place, while being sheltered from the elements. The school is being rebuilt in the north as we speak. He paused as he flipped over the page. We found an excellent area for Nilton's critter hospital, a patch of grass between two sturdier boulders, with a gentle stream nearby. I put Smidge in charge of helping him, since she'd do it whether she had permission to or not. The mushroom patch towards the east that I was telling you about will need a lot of renovating before we can build new pods. I found plenty of hornets' nests, some rotting mushrooms, swampy areas, as well as several flameberry bushes. Flameberries! Poppy panicked at the mention of those deadly berries. Trolls haven't eaten any, have they? Are they aware of how dangerous those berries are? Unpleasant memories reminded her of how close several children had gotten to eating them. What if someone eats some? What if they get sick? What if they did? In a heartbeat, Branch was beside her with one arm around her slender frame. No. No one has gotten anywhere near them. I've made sure of that. Since we're exploring uncharted landscapes, your father ordered that no trolling is allowed past the current village border, and any adults entering the new land are to observe, not touch. They must report everything they find to either me or King Peppy, especially anything out of the ordinary. As for the flameberries in the mushroom patch, I blocked off the area with bright tape and large warning signs. Plus I handed out brochures of common, unsuspecting dangers to look out for. Poppy breathed a sigh of relief, so Branch stepped back and continued. If I can't eliminate those 4 issues, we'll have to build somewhere else. She felt a stab of dread at the bad news, so he quickly amended, but that's not a problem. We still have plenty of places in mind, and land to investigate. It's a very minor setback. Branch flipped to the next page, but before reading it aloud, he confirmed, Do you want me to continue, or do you need a break? Poppy took a deep breath to calm her swirling nerves. She probably could use a break, but she wasn't going to take one. I'm okay. Continue. Branch cleared his throat. Upon further investigation, I'm no longer sure if the meadow will still be a suitable place for Claus's bakery. Too much direct sunlight, so we may need to put Maddie's shop there instead. We have a rough layout of the new sections of the village, but we can't get everything done at once, so we need to prioritise the larger and more urgent projects. The fun factory, the farms, the school, the critter hospital, and pods for the families with multiple children or frail elders. Poppy sat in her chair, feeling weighed down by all the construction that still needed to be done. They've accomplished so much, yet it was the equivalent of putting a single sprinkle on a towering cake. But where will Rufus's farm go? The south was the most fertile soil in the whole forest. I know, but further north, beyond the swamp, there's an open field that looks very promising. Some trolls are running tests on the soil, to be sure, but I bet my hair it will become Rufus's new farm. However, that wasn't Poppy's biggest concern. But what about this winter? We barely have any food. Most of the farms got washed away along with half of our restaurants, fruit trees, berry bushes. There's no way we'll have enough to last until spring. Even if we ration the food, we're gonna run out. Trolls will be hungry. Branch knelt in front of her. That's not going to happen, Poppy. How is it not going to happen, Branch? We have almost no food, and we can't magically make a bunch of food appear. Poppy instantly regretted raising her voice once again at her boyfriend, and was about to attempt an apology, but she noticed he was smiling. Actually, I can. She raised an eyebrow at his odd reply, and he elaborated. Remember when you first started visiting me, and I gave you the tour of my bunker? Poppy's dark eyebrow raised higher, not understanding where he was going with this. Uh-huh. You pointed out my stash of extra supplies, and you asked me why I have so many. And I told you. Poppy's dull eyes suddenly widened. In case of an emergency! For the first time in almost a month, she felt a wave of relief. Of course, Branch's emergency stockpile in his bunker. I thought it was cool because you'd never run out of anything.
Branch nodded. Exactly. My crates of preserved food will easily last us through the winter, and until we can regrow more. Now, that doesn't mean we can have grand 5-course feasts. My overstock may seem endless, but it isn't. So we'll still have to take it easy. But we will certainly have enough to live comfortably. No one will go hungry.
Poppy was so relieved she actually let out a sigh. There were still 100 things poking at her anxieties, but at least hundreds of hungry trolls was one less thing she needed to fret over. But her moment of peace didn't last long, as something else came to mind. What about that tarantula nest?
Branch's nod was regretful. We haven't eliminated it yet. We're still trying to figure out the best plan of action. Currently, that entire section is off limits. Mac was released from Dr. Moonbloom's this morning. He's going to make a full recovery. I told him to stop by later so you could see for yourself.
Poppy nodded, staring down at her feet. A group of trolls, led by Mac, had come across the predators yesterday by accident. Mac had gotten ambushed by a territorial arachnid, but thankfully Branch had trained him and his companions in tarantula defences, so Mac's injuries were limited to a sprained wrist, a bump on the head, and a cut on his leg. But it could have been so much worse. Branch had been hesitant to tell Poppy this information yesterday, not wanting to burden her with bad news. But she had sensed he was hiding something from her and demanded the truth. She may be a bad queen, but she was still the queen. She needed to know what was going on in the village, good or bad. Branch stood up and continued.
Other than that, there are no signs of predators or other dangers in the new sections of the forest. I expanded the search well beyond our new planned borders, so we'll be sure the surrounding areas are safe as well. That'll reduce the chances of encountering nasty surprises down the road. The new land is quite different than what we're used to. More rocky formations, fewer mushrooms, shorter trees. But it won't take long to adjust. Once we add all our colourful pods and trademark shops and fun parks, it will feel more like Troll Village. In time, we won't think of it as a new part of the village versus the old part. We'll view the entire thing as home.
Poppy nodded, though she was having a tough time imagining the village settling into some foreign forest. Everything will be so different. Sure, we can rebuild pods and shops and parks, but they won't be the same. Nothing will ever be the same again.
Branch added, There is a beautiful waterfall, unique stones and harmless flowers rarely seen in these parts, a wide variety of fruit trees, and many nice landmarks. I believe we will not only make this new location work, but we'll make the most of this change and build an even better village.
What about Riverhound's restaurant? Poppy couldn't stop thinking about the sweet blue troll and her family. How their long-awaited restaurant had just gotten on its feet, and now they would have to start from scratch. Are they still looking at the base of the large maple tree for their new location? Are they going to try to keep the original design or change it completely?
I'm not sure yet. I was planning on checking up on them next.
Branch offered her his hand.
Why don't you tag along so you can ask them yourself?
Poppy shrank away, shaking her head roughly. I still don't want to. This was the 4th day in a row Branch had suggested she go outside. But this time, when she rejected, his hand did not budge.
I know you don't want to, but you need to, Poppy. I know I'm being a pain in the neck, but it'll be good for you to get out of your pod, get some fresh air, have different surroundings, get your mind on something else, something better. Come on, just 10 minutes.
She stared at his unmoving hand, silent for nearly a minute. He was not going to give up on her this time. Finally, she sighed. Fine. She plopped her hand into his and let him drag her toward the door. Branch stepped outside first. Poppy hesitated, Sitting on her couch sounded much more tempting than walking around the village. She continued to hover in the doorway, while he waited patiently for her, not letting go of her hand, but not pulling her along either, until finally she sucked in a breath, and for the first time in 3 weeks, stepped out of her pod. Poppy squinted and rapidly blinked her eyelids, trying to adjust to the sudden brightness. A dozen trolls were milling around, looking content. One small group were chatting excitedly about something. Another 2 trolls nearby were laughing. Sparkly Gia was playing with her sparkly kite, and Maddie was heading toward the east, skipping and singing. Everything seemed normal, except it wasn't. Further south and west, the village was gone, the forest destroyed beyond repair. Further north and east, trolls were hard at work to rebuild what was lost, in a strange new village. Troll Village will never be the same again. Ever. One troll from the largest group noticed the Grey Queen outside her pod, and one by one the rest of the group noticed as well. They looked surprised for a second. Then huge smiles spread across their colourful faces, and they waved excitedly at her from afar. Branch immediately waved back, then glanced at Poppy. He tilted his head for a second, gesturing for her to greet them. So she lifted one hand and moved it side to side, stiffly and half-heartedly, like a trolling learning how to wave. But no one in the group looked offended by her curt greeting. In addition to telling everyone that she needed space, Branch must have warned them she wouldn't be as friendly as usual. Instead, they happily continued about their business. A few ran off, looking like they were about to spread the word that their queen was finally out and about. And that made Poppy very uneasy. Would there suddenly be a mob of hyper-happy trolls surrounding her, greeting her and questioning her and singing to her and trying to hug her? Would she end up getting mad at them and hurting their feelings? Would they end up hating her? Branch leaned toward her and softly asked, "Where would you like to go?" Poppy bit her tongue. "Back under my blankets." Aloud, she murmured, "I don't know. Not far." "That's okay," Branch murmured. "Why don't we start with a walk around the stage? Then we'll go from there." So the pair travelled around the large mushroom under Poppy's pod. She was numb to her surroundings. The chilly breeze, the autumn bugs chirping a nice melody, a cute bunny hopping by. The stage's colourful decorations, faint music in the distance. Still, she trudged along, eyes wandering around, but not focusing on anything in particular. Branch kept pace beside her, his steps light. For the most part, he kept his eyes on the path ahead, but Poppy could tell he was watching her out of the corner of his eye. When they completed the loop, Poppy abruptly stopped walking, so he came for a stop too. He placed a hand on her shoulder, likely to see if she was tense or trembling. He got his answer, and suggested, "Would you like to go back to your pod?" Poppy nodded before he even finished his sentence. "That's fine. You got out of the house for a few minutes, and that's great. That's all that matters. We can try another small walk tomorrow after lunch. Okay?" "Okay," she muttered. It wasn't okay. She wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. But what else could she say? As they approached her pod, Branch inquired, "Do you feel any better?" Poppy pondered for a moment. Did she feel better? She wouldn't say she felt worse. She was more uptight, but less exhausted and achy. I don't know. Maybe a little tiny bit? Sort of, I guess. Branch smiled approvingly. "You look better." Poppy glanced at him doubtfully. "I do?" "Yes. Your eyes are more alert, and you're standing up a bit straighter." She didn't comment. "Doesn't sound that much better to me." Once inside, Branch said he'd see her later, and once again added an "I love you," without waiting for a response. She wanted to say it back, but knew it would sound forced and emotionless, so she opted to say nothing. Alone in her dimly lit pod once again, Poppy couldn't decide whether that little walk made her feel better or worse. Both? Neither? Can't my emotions just make up their flipping mind? I want to stay inside, and yet I don't. I don't want to go outside, yet I do. How am I supposed to even make the simplest decisions? The following day, Branch stayed at Poppy's pod to have lunch. She had a tiny salad, while his was a normal-sized meal, almost 3 times larger. They'd made a deal. Once they were both finished with their food, they would take another stroll outside. Branch was already taking his empty plate to the sink, while Poppy continued to poke at the bit of food remaining on her plate. The lone lettuce leaf and 2 cranberries. It wasn't only her lack of appetite this time. She was purposefully stalling. Her boyfriend puttered around aimlessly for a minute, then pressed, "Are you going to finish up?" Poppy gave the larger cranberry one final jab before setting down her fork. "I don't think so." So Branch cleared away her dishes, making her feel guilty again. Yet she didn't volunteer to take her own dishes, and likely wouldn't the next time either. Then he held his broad hand out as he had done before. "Ready to go?" Poppy plunked her hand into his. "I guess. Might as well get this over with." For today's walk, Branch expanded their path and circled the village centre. They passed a handful of trolls again, who all said a friendly hello, but kept a bit of distance and tried to minimise their excitement to avoid overwhelming their queen. Yet even those toned-down interactions made Poppy uncomfortable. She returned a "hi" to each of them, trying to sound as excited as possible. Yet it came out sounding flatter than a piece of paper. The next day, Branch led Poppy down a short trail at the far side of the village centre. When they came to a fork in the road, he asked her which way she'd like to go. Right, which would circle back toward her pod, or left, which would lead her further away toward a cluster of amusement parks. Poppy hesitated, her eyes darting from left to right. She had to admit, the second walk had made her feel a bit better. She wasn't as tense for most of the day. She slept for a couple of extra hours, and even ate a few extra bites at dinner. However, the urge to head back home was still very strong. Bracing herself, Poppy made her decision. "This way," and turned left, away from her pod. "I don't want to laze around anymore. I'm bored. I'm being no help to the village. I'm wasting Branch's time. I need to get out more. Everyone else is working their hair off. The least I can do is take a stupid walk." So she marched along, ignoring the unease in her belly. Trying to ignore the unease in her belly. Failing to ignore the unease. She was getting lightheaded and finding it difficult to breathe. Her feet suddenly got much heavier. She stumbled, and Branch was supporting her before she could blink.
"Poppy, are you alright?"
"I'm fine. Let's keep going." She started forward, but felt resistance.
Branch was gently gripping her wrist. "Poppy, maybe we should turn around."
She stubbornly shook her head. "No, I can keep going. I have to keep going. I need to go further, Branch. I should be able to. So I'm going to." But Branch did not let go of her little grey hand.
"I don't want to tell you what to do, and I'm glad to see you're willing to push yourself. But remember, sometimes it's best to take small steps forward than take too big a step and end up stumbling backward. I would never want to hold you back, but I don't want you to do more to harm yourself. Never mind what you should be able to do. Think about what you are able to do. So, would going further be the healthiest choice right now?" Or would it be best to take a break and start fresh tomorrow?
Poppy pondered for a moment, then sighed in both exasperation and relief. Take a break. Back at her pod, Branch made sure she was settled on her couch with a glass of water and a small container of grapes, just in case, then headed out for the door. But before he closed it, she called out, "Branch?" He peeked back in. She lowered her head and muttered, "Thank you." Her simple, half-hearted gratitude put a smile on his handsome face.
You're welcome, love. You know I'm always here for you, in any way you need me.
The day after that, Poppy managed to make it to the border of the new village. They took a break halfway there, and Branch was surprised when she insisted she wanted to continue. But he didn't sense any significant anxiety or hesitation in her words or body language, so they extended the walk. He reminded her,
"If you change your mind at any point, just let me know."
Now, here she was, staring out at what used to be uncivilized woods, and was now becoming the new half of Troll Village. A couple of half-built pods, several various construction sites, trees being cut down, and land being reshaped, trolls bustling all over the place and from every direction. Everyone seemed to be happy, smiling, laughing, singing, and dancing while hard at work. Poppy wished she could share their happiness, but seeing all their hard work was only a painful reminder of how much was lost in the Great Flood. A shout to her right drew her attention. Several tree lengths away, Green Master Builder Larry was directing a bunch of workers who were carrying lumber and other supplies toward a very large foundation. That must be the new fun factory, Poppy realized. The innocent thought brought back images of the original factory, how it had so easily crumbled into the floodwaters like a flimsy house of cards. The eerie crack as the entire building broke apart. She could still clearly recall every bit of scattered debris, from the yellow streamers that had snagged in a thorn bush, to the bent tube of blue wrapping paper with silver stars that clung to the edge of the cliff, to the 7 red Trollmas ornaments scattered in the sand, to the crumpled, colourful papers blowing sadly in the breeze. Every last detail. She swallowed the lump in her throat, but it did nothing to quell the sinking feeling in her gut. In that moment, 2 flyer-bugs flew overhead. The scenes replaying in her memory switched instantly, like changing the channel on the radio. Branch's long, risky journey to find the problem with Colossal Lake, only to discover it was a ticking time bomb. The stressful evacuation. Branch's frantic warning that the flood was on its way. Him going to search for the 6 missing trolls, and then returning without Branch. Her rushing out to help him. Her flyerbug fleeing. Both her and her boyfriend nearly drowning. Creak. When Poppy zoned back into the present, she realized Branch was shouting out to a troll in the distance, sounding like he was answering a question they asked. Poppy's heart was pounding, and she felt nauseous, more so than normal. As soon as their conversation ended, she tapped Branch on the shoulder. "I think I need to go home." Branch nodded immediately.
"Okay."
And started to guide her back toward her pod without any objections or questions. She felt as though she had no energy, yet she was walking so quickly Branch struggled to keep up. She just wanted to go home, away from all these terrible memories. But Poppy should have known she couldn't escape her own mind. That night, she dreamed that the new fun factory was complete, and everyone was celebrating the grand reopening. Happy pink Poppy was about to cut the red ribbon, but out of nowhere, a wall of water came toward them. The trolls managed to get out of the way, but it hit the factory, destroying the entire thing. With another ear-splitting crack, it crumbled away into nothing and disappeared forever into the rush of water. Just like almost every night since the evening she had turned grey, Branch jolted awake 1 second after her. alerted by her screaming and or crying, or in this case, both. He held her close and rubbed her back, and she was a stuttering, panicky mess.
Are you sure the factory is on stable ground?
Yes. You ran plenty of tests. The ground is very firm throughout that entire area.
But what about water? Is there any lakes or nearby rivers?
There is one very small stream nearby, but it's a gentle and narrow stream, about as wide as your pillow. Even if it floods in the spring, it won't pose any threat to the factory or the ground around it.
But what if there's another flood in the new part of the village, or this part?
We've researched and explored for miles around. There are no bodies of water large enough to cause significant damage to the forest. Infinity River was the only one.
So you're sure it's safe there? The factory won't get destroyed again?
It's safe. We're taking every precaution. And we're also planning to enhance the structure to make it even stronger than before, so it will be able to withstand any natural disasters that may occur in the future. Branch continued to hold her close. He remained patient and soft-spoken, not the slightest bit judgmental or frustrated by her irrational fears. Even though he had been rudely awoken at 2 a.m, after working for almost 12 hours straight, and will have to get up at 6:30 to work another 12 hours, not a single cell in his body felt any contempt toward her. His only concern was comforting Bobby, no matter how much time or effort it took. How Branch managed to be so compassionate with her when she was being such a pain boggled Poppy's mind. After that, Poppy dozed off and on, fully waking up at around 10:36 and staying in bed until 11:25, staring listlessly up at her ceiling. She was tired and stiff with yet another headache and stomachache, or as she had named it, an everything ache. Normally, waking up like this made her feel irritated and grumpy, like she wanted to curse and kick something. Today, she just felt sad, defeated, like she wanted to curl up into a ball of hair and whimper. That afternoon, Branch suggested they walk around to the large maple tree, just beyond the hill along the old northern border.
River Aunt's family has decided to change their design slightly. I think it's going to look outstanding, and the location is perfect for it. Would you like to see the restaurant's foundation?
But Poppy lowered her head. Actually, can we take it easy today? I'm really not feeling well, and I don't think I'm ready to see that yet. It's just, their restaurant was the last place I was before the evacuation, before everything changed, and the last time I was not unhappy.
Of course we can take it easy.
Branch hurried over to her and grasped both her hands.
We can do whatever you're comfortable with.
He lowered his head, ashamed.
I'm so sorry, Poppy. I should have thought of that. I can't believe I just made that suggestion. That was so foolish of me.
No, it's okay. You were just trying to help me. You can't read my mind, and it's not your fault I'm so oversensitive right now. Branch gave her hands an affectionate little squeeze.
Do you have any place in mind?
She shook her head.
How about visiting Milton's critters? That way you can interact with other living beings without actually having to socialize.
That sounded great. Plus, worrying about Milton's fragile critters was one of the many things on her mile-long stress list. Yeah, let's do that. Charlotte's shop wasn't far away, so even with Poppy trudging at her depressed pace, it still only took 20 minutes. 4 trolls were inside the square pod. Milton, Smidge, Charlotte and Karma. Branch and Poppy hung back outside, until the veterinarian noticed them and came over to greet them.
Good afternoon, Branch.
Good to see you, Queen Poppy. How are you today? Poppy shrugged. I'm okay.
Milton frowned. I'm sorry I haven't been over to visit you. Between taking care of my critters and helping out around the village, I haven't had a chance. It's okay, Milton. It's not a big deal. Smidge told me you said hi. At least you're doing something productive, unlike me. If you did come and visit me, I'd find some way to be rude to you anyway. Milton smiled. I knew she would. So, what can I do for you two? Branch glanced at Poppy. Would you like to ask, or would you like me to? She started to fidget with her own fingers, feeling uneasy under Milton's warm, dark green gaze. It was an awkward, antsy feeling, like she was shy. I've talked to Milton 1,000,000 times. What's wrong with me? And she was only asking a simple, harmless, casual question. Yet her mind kept buzzing with silly questions. What if I upset him? What if he gets mad at me? What if he tells me to go away? Poppy frowned to herself. This is so dumb. Milton is the gentlest troll in the entire village. Why am I making such a big deal about nothing? Finally, Poppy muttered to Branch. You ask. So Branch turned to Milton, who was waiting patiently. Do you mind if Poppy and I visit the animals for a few minutes? As expected, Milton was as gentle as ever. Of course. Feel free to stay as long as you'd like. Do you want us to give you the pod to yourself? Branch nodded. Yes, please. As long as we aren't interrupting anything. No, not at all. Smidge and I were planning to go and grab some lunch in town. So we'll do that right now. Just one thing. Please avoid the cuddle pup in the far corner. He's recovering from surgery. As Branch and Poppy stepped inside, Smidge, Karma and Charlotte greeted them as well. Milton and Smidge headed out, soon followed by Karma, who wanted to check out some new earth-toned fabric at the neighbouring store. Charlotte retrieved a comic book and went to relax on her patio. Branch sat in one of the waiting chairs, giving his girlfriend all the space she needed. Standing inside the middle of the room, Poppy gazed around at the cages. Some critters were making noise, some were resting. There was another cuddle pup nearby. The aquamarine cutie was barking cheerfully, so she went over to him first. She knelt in front of the cage and reached in briefly to pet his fuchsia hair tuft, causing his matching tail to wag. Poppy wished she could be like him, completely unaware of and unaffected by all the chaos that had occurred about a month ago. In the neighbouring cages, a baby sloth and Harry, the elderly glowfly, were sleeping, so Poppy moved on to a younger glowfly. Her lime green fuzz was so soft, and as Poppy rubbed it, the little round bug made the cutest little purr. It almost succeeded in warming Poppy's heart, but then an image of the great flood flashed in her vision, and her spirits cooled down again. A few steps to the right was a hanging cage, where Poppy found a pretty pink bird with a purple beak and big black eyes. She read the bird's info sheet. Named Mia, who loved worms and sunflower seeds, is very intelligent and can do several tricks. So Poppy tested out the list. Speak. Mia chirped. Wave. Mia lifted one wing and flapped it. Twirl. Mia jumped and fully spun around, landing perfectly. Poppy also read that the little birds had suffered from a severe infection. Whatever medication Milton was using was certainly working. Mia would probably be released very soon, so she could continue with her happy life. At least one of us can do that. Next, she moved on to the busy buzzer, named Buzz. The blue and orange beetle-like creature was curled up in the far corner, looking very sad. Normally, these insects were constantly active and upbeat, but Buzz couldn't do much while confined in a cage with a badly broken wing. I feel you, buddy. Poppy reached out to rest her hand on one of his slim legs. He raised his head, and their eyes met. They could sense each other's low spirits, and found some slight comfort in sharing similar misfortunes. Eventually, Poppy stood up and went to the other side of the room, starting with the largest cage, Debbie,
the yellow with green stripes doppling. The deer-like creature was missing a hind leg, an eye, and had a large scar down one side. Yet she seemed so happy, standing proudly on 3 legs, her one eye bright, and a smile on her long snout where she wagged her thick green tail. Debbie had obviously been through a terrible experience, but she was still able to be cheerful. I used to be effortlessly optimistic like that. Now I can't even force myself to be. A few feet away was someone's pet bunny, fluffy and grey, Cloudy. When Poppy knelt in front of his cage, his bright eyes stared at her warily, studying her from head to toe. He approached slowly, sniffing her hand intently. He's probably confused to see such a dull-coloured troll, Poppy realised. Cloudy's long ears suddenly perked up, and he started to lick her hand, as if he was trying to heal her. Poppy swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. The bunny's affection was sweet, but not even the kindest gesture would heal her. However, it was kind of soothing, so she closed her eyes and let him continue. After a few minutes, Cloudy went to get a drink of water, so Poppy took to her right and noticed another cage, separate from the others. At first glance, she thought it was empty, until she noticed a pair of dark amber eyes peeking out from under a mound of dirt in the far corner. She shuffled over to look at the info sheet. Name Maroon. Species mole. Status recovering from near drowning. Extremely withdrawn. Poppy felt a pang in her chest as she reread his status. He almost drowned. He's been affected by the flood too. She sat on the floor in front of the timid mole and whispered, "Hey, buddy. Hey, Maroon." His bright eyes blinked twice, but he did not move. He wanted to hide from everyone and everything. Like me. Although, I don't want to hide as much anymore. Getting out of my pod was super uncomfortable at first, but now it doesn't bother me as much. Branch was right. It has made me feel less terrible, less bored, less stiff, not as trapped. Poppy poked her hand into the cage, just enough to set it on the bottom, but didn't speak. After a minute or two, Maroon's long snout poked out to take a sniff. Another minute later, the dirt shifted as he slowly crawled out. Over the span of another minute, he inched his way toward her. All the while, she remained still and silent. Finally, he got close enough to tentatively sniff Poppy's hand. Then he curled up in a ball beside it. There was a gentle knock on the door. Poppy, Maroon, and Branch turned their heads towards the sound. Milton was speaking in. "Sorry to bother you. I forgot my—" The veterinarian trailed off, and his dark green eyes lit up as he spotted Maroon by Poppy's hand. At that moment, the mole realised there was an audience, and retreated under the dirt mound. But Milton was still impressed. "Wow! That's the first time I've seen Maroon out and about. He refused to go near any troll. Even me. How did you do that, Poppy?" Poppy took her hand out of the cage and shrugged. "I don't know. I didn't really do anything." Yet Branch was looking at her proudly. "I think that's the point." He stood up and walked over to her. "You didn't try to coax him out, but you didn't completely ignore him either. You were quiet, calm, and patient, and you let him come out of his shell at his own pace. Your simple presence was all he needed." Although Branch was speaking about the mole, it seemed his words had another, deeper implication. They stirred up some non-negative memories in Poppy. How she had behaved when Branch was grey, relentlessly trying to force him to have fun, before learning how to offer him appropriate affection and real support, which allowed him to become the wonderful troll he is today. It gave Poppy the tiniest warmth in her chest. So brief she wondered if she imagined it. Milton nodded approvingly. "Well, I won't keep you. I'll get what I need and be on your way." The mauve troll hurried to the far side of the pod, his makeshift living area, grabbed his necessary belongings and headed toward the door, passing briefly to pet Debbie and Cloudy along the way. He paused once more to say, "Have a good day." Branch responded with, "You too, Milton. See you later. And thanks again." Even Poppy offered a farewell. "Bye, Milton. Thanks." Once the door closed, Branch looked down at Poppy with shining blue eyes. They were practically glowing. She blinked, confusedly. What? He knelt in front of her and tenderly brushed her bangs away from her eye before answering. "I saw that." "Saw what?" "Your little smile." "My smile?" For a second, Poppy couldn't understand what he meant. Then it clicked. I smiled?"
"Yes, my love, you did. An adorable little half smile." He chuckled warmly. "And you're doing it again."
"I am?" She did feel something in one corner of her mouth, so she reached up to touch it. And, sure enough, it was lifted upward, ever so slightly. Uh-huh. Her mouth was doing something other than a frown, and it was making her cheeks stiff. It feels weird. She made a face as she stretched out her jaw, and Branch chuckled again, louder this time. He wrapped an arm around her.
"Someday it will feel normal again, sweetheart. If I can get used to smiling, you certainly can."
The following morning, Poppy could truly say she felt a tiny bit better. Far from excellent, but not totally rotten either. She got out of bed before 10 o'clock, had only one mildly unsettling dream, and even ate some cereal. And when Branch arrived to ask if she was ready for their daily stroll, she nodded, "Yeah, I am." He looked surprised by her immediate and direct answer.
"I'm glad to hear that. You might want to put on a jacket before we leave. It's quite chilly today."
He was wearing a fuzzy green sweatshirt in place of his usual leafy green vest. So Poppy threw on her aquamarine shawl. As Branch led her through another section of the new village, her thoughts wandered. The weather was indeed chillier. The trees were almost bare, and the animals were preparing for hibernation. Winter was on its way, which made Poppy worry yet again about their meagre food supply. "We have so many trollings and elders to feed. Our main farm plus many gardens were lost in the flood. We have a very small stockpile, smaller than ever before. But we do have Branch's emergency supplies. They will get us through the winter, and in the spring until we can grow more." But she was still concerned about those who were homeless. The trolls from the west and south have no pods of their own. They've had to squeeze into other people's pods and make temporary living spaces. The east and north pods are all crowded, having to reorganize their lives and share their homes. But sharing is what trolls do best. It's like having extended slumber parties or new roommates. Everyone is comfortable for now. Everyone will be cozy for the winter. And as soon as the snow is gone, Branch and the other builders will work hard to reconstruct all the pods so everyone can get back to their lives as soon as possible. But what if the new parts of the village turn out to be unsafe? Colossal Lake and Infinity River seemed so peaceful, so innocent. What if there are lakes and rivers in the new land that could suddenly flood? What if there are other hidden dangers? What if trolls get hurt? No. Branch has assured me it's safe, and determined which parts are risky and should be avoided. He has explored high and low for miles and miles around, tested every leaf and pebble, and I trust his abilities 100%. Thanks to him, everyone knows what to watch out for, potential red flags, and oddities, so no one can be caught off guard. Nothing is 100% safe, but we're taking every precaution to make sure we're as safe as possible. Poppy was distracted from her internal conflicts when a group of trolls approached Branch to confirm some building plans and make suggestions for new locations. They greeted her as well, and started the usual conversation. asking how she was feeling, what she was up to today, commented on the weather, and that it's nice to see her. She gave them brief answers, trying not to sound too curt. I'm feeling okay. Not much, just out for a walk. Yeah, the weather's not bad. Thank you. You too. Eventually, they gave her a cheerful farewell, though nothing about their tone had stood out to her in any way at any point. Poppy started to overthink it. Is their friendliness forced? Are they actually mad at me? They don't seem to be mad, but maybe they're really good at hiding it? Or they were mad in the beginning, now they're not as mad? Should they still be mad at me? I mean, I haven't done anything to regain their respect. They must think less of me for being absent during this time of need. But they're all being sympathetic. At least they seem to be. If they were mad or disappointed with me, I should have seen something by now. A glare, a funny look, some whispering, some little sign. Not even a minute later, Poppy was waiting for Branch by a bush, and overheard someone beyond it saying, "Hey, have you guys seen Queen Poppy lately?" Her chest immediately tightened. Peeking through the gap in the leaves, she found 7 trolls, and it was clear none of them knew that she was there right now. And now that she had no vibrant glow, it was easy for her to blend into her surroundings. She held her breath as she waited nervously to hear what they would say when they didn't know she was listening. "I saw her just a few minutes ago, actually." A purple girl with green hair named Iris commented. Poppy tensed. "Is that good or bad?"
"It's nice to finally see her out of her pod,"
another troll added. He didn't sound or look like he was implying that in a negative way. Still, Poppy imagined the next thing would be something like, "Yeah, it's about time. She's the queen. And she's just been sitting around for the last month while we work our hair off. She hasn't even asked how we're doing." Instead, the opposite was true, by a yellow guy with orange freckles.
"I feel bad for her. I can't imagine what it must be like to feel so sad and tired all the time. I hope she gets better very soon."
A middle-aged troll wearing a bright red dress agreed.
"Me too. I miss our cheerful queen."
"I wish we could do more to help her," a pink glitter girl murmured sadly. Iris spoke again. "Like Branch said, the best thing we can do for her is let her know we're here, or when she needs us. Queen Poppy has always supported each and every one of us. Now it's our turn to help her. And we can do that by staying positive and make sure the village is taken care of until she's back on her feet." A teenage girl with neon green hair exclaimed, "Once she's all better, we'll have to throw her a party. A massive party! The most massive party in history!" Her younger sister with identical hair squealed, "We should start planning it right now." "But remember," Logical Iris pointed out, "Branch said we have to ration our supplies, or we could run out completely. We don't want that, or we won't be able to have any small parties." "Oh, yeah." The older, bright green-haired girl was despondent for only a second, then perked back up again. "Well, that's okay. We can just have a friendly gathering. A few snacks, some reusable decorations, and lots of music and games. It can still be fun." The 7 trolls excitedly hurried off, discussing ideas. That conversation was a huge relief for Poppy. As she continued her tour with Branch, her steps were lighter, and she felt a slight warmth rise in her chest as she passed by dozens of trolls. Spirits were high, colours were as bright as ever. Steady progress was being made. She even managed to eat a few berries along the way. For a few minutes, things were finally looking up. Poppy could almost believe life was returning to normal. Until she and Branch went to check on Klaus's half-built bakery. They rounded a boulder, approached the foundation, and the moustache baker started to brainstorm new ideas with Branch. It was then Poppy noticed a sound to her left. A gentle, constant splashing. She turned her head, and her heart dropped to her stomach like a rock. A tree length away was a river. It was only a few yards wide, slow moving and very beautiful. but it sent a massive chill down Poppy's spine. As she stared at it with wide eyes, vivid scenes invaded her vision. The dangerously swollen colossal lake, the enormous wall of water coming at her like a herd of Bergens, the forest disappearing under an ocean of water, the giant fun factory disintegrating, Creek's terrifying face as the top of the tree before he was violently swished away. Poppy stumbled, nearly losing her footing. The images were blindingly bright and deafeningly loud. Her breathing was shallow, until she was gasping and wheezing. The memories attacked her relentlessly, as if these events were happening all over again. She gripped the sides of her head and let out a sharp yelp. The entire world was spinning in the most unpleasant way, and finally her knees gave out. But someone caught her. Branch! His frantic voice broke through her terror. Poppy! Hey, whoa, it's okay. I'm here. It's okay. He guided her down to a sitting position. Deep breaths, Poppy. Slow, deep breaths. You're okay. I've got you. Everything's alright. You're alright. I'm right here. Poppy, can you hear me? Her eyes stayed wide and unblinking. Her heart was pounding painfully in her chest. Her head was pounding almost as viciously, but it felt as though she had been hit in the gut by a firework. When Branch repeated his question, she finally responded with a slow, stunned nod. Her shawl had partially fallen off her shoulders, but there was no need for it anymore. Despite her visible shivering, she was on fire and sweating as if it was the hottest summer day. Branch turned his head and shouted out, "Someone get me a glass of cold water, now!" Poppy noticed Somptroll dart away out of the corner of her eye, but she didn't see who it was, nor did she care in that moment. Then Branch turned back to her. Hey, look at me, Poppy. What happened? Poppy was shivering so badly her voice vibrated. I don't know. I was just standing here, and then I started seeing all these awful things. Memories of the flood. They were so clear and so loud and so... I couldn't stop them. I couldn't see or hear anything around me. Like reality was gone, and I was stuck in the memories. The horrible memories. Branch started to rub her back. Both his touch and his voice were a powerful sympathy. Those were flashbacks. Poppy clutched her shawl. Could they happen again? What if they keep happening? What am I going to do? I can't! Slow down, Poppy. We'll get this figured out. Try to stay calm. Focused on getting your breathing under control. Breathing under control. Calm. She closed her eyes, but that only caused fractions of the flashbacks to reappear. So instead, she focused her gaze onto her boyfriend. His compassionate sky-blue eyes, his handsome green-blue skin, the feel of his broad hands tenderly massaging her back and shoulder. It took a few minutes, but her panicked gasps finally evened out. In the meantime, the troll returned with a glass of water and ice cubes. He handed it to Branch, who thanked him and held it in front of Poppy. Her hands were still trembling, but with Branch's help, she managed a few sips. Her initial terror had subsided, now replaced by sadness and anxiety. She whimpered, "What am I gonna do, Branch?" He shifted to kneel beside her, and she let her head fall onto his shoulder. What we are going to do is figure out what caused these flashbacks. Something must have triggered them. I know it's hard, but I need you to think back to the minutes before the flashback started. What were you doing? Nothing! I was just standing here! Poppy snapped, frustrated with herself. Branch's voice remained as tender as ever.
Okay. How about your senses? What were you seeing? What were you hearing?
I don't know. Then she paused to actually try to formulate an answer. Carefully pick through the recent memories. I saw you talk to claws. I saw a bird fly overhead. I saw the orange leaves all around me, and the kids playing in the distance over that way. I heard Claus telling you his new ideas for the bakery's interior design. I heard someone laugh loudly. I heard... Poppy's voice suddenly caught in her throat. Branch leaned in closer.
What? What did you hear?
The river, she shuddered. I saw the flowing water. She felt dizzy, yet antsy, like she wanted to sprint back to her pod. But if she did, she'd pass out. Well, I think I just figured out the cause. She tried to turn and look behind her at the river. But she just couldn't. Instead, she scrunched her eyes shut and kept her back to it. In an instant, Branch's eyes lit up with understanding. He concluded simply,
It subconsciously reminded you of the flood.
She nodded sadly, tucking her knees up to her chest. Branch continued to soothe her.
That's a very important step forward. We figured out what the trigger is. Now we can figure out how to deal with it, right?
Poppy nodded again, but his reassurance didn't give her any hope. Her eyes finally started to refocus, allowing her to see past her own terror-filled personal bubble. Only then did she realise how many trolls were in the area. At least a dozen, and all of them were staring at her with gaping mouths and horrified eyes. She stifled a whimper, shame and guilt weighing her down, as if that boulder nearby had fallen on her. The corners of her eyes began to sting. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm really sorry I scared you. Their expressions quickly softened.
It's all right, Queen Poppy.
We were just worried about you. Are you okay now? Poppy wiped her eyes roughly and nodded. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. She wasn't, but she didn't need to stress them out more than she already had. The look in Branch's eyes indicated he knew that's what she was doing. Afterward, he promptly took her home, promising Claus he'd return later today to continue their conversation. Poppy stayed silent for the entire walk, but, as usual, her thoughts were far from quiet. As soon as Branch shut her pod door behind them, he asked lightly,
You aren't actually okay, are you?
Unable to hold it in any longer, Poppy burst out crying. No! She crumpled to her knees. I don't know if I ever will be. Branch knelt beside her.
You will be.
I'm so sorry, Branch.
You have nothing to apologise for, Poppy.
Yes, I do. I interrupted your important conversation with Claus. I scared the hair off everyone. It's bad enough I can't make my village happy, but now I've done the opposite and ruined their happiness. I'm a terrible queen.
You're not a terrible queen. You're sick.
But I'm not getting any better. I thought I was. I was kind of starting to feel not so bad. And then I was like, hey, maybe I'm finally getting better. And now I feel terrible again. I'm back to square one. Branch held her close as she sobbed.
That will happen, Poppy. Some days you'll take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But you are getting better. Let me ask you something. Do you still want to continue touring the new village? Not right now, but sometime soon maybe. In a day or 2?
Poppy thought for a minute. Yes, I think so. I mean, I'm extremely nervous about it, in case something like this happens again. But I still want to see what's going on in the village.
That right there proves you're getting better. In the beginning, you refused to step outside of your pod, remember? You're willing to get out and about now, and get involved with the village, even after an unpleasant experience. I know it doesn't feel like you're improving, but I can see that you are. You will make a full recovery, Poppy. I promise. And I never make promises I can't keep.
End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh Lord. She's healing, but she had a relapse. God, that's... I feel you there, Poppy. I've had something like that happen to me last week. Jeez. 2 chapters ago, or maybe was it 3, I mentioned that I had a horrible anxiety attack where I fainted. Well, that was on a Friday morning, and the Wednesday night after that, I had a relapse so bad I had to call in sick at my workplace because I was shaking like a leaf and woke up with a migraine because of it. One thing about me, I can actually fall asleep during an anxiety attack because the initial wave of adrenaline wears off. I wake up, remember why I was scared, and suddenly I'm shaking again. At least it means I can sleep, but Poppy, God, I can feel that. And she really needed to hear that conversation between those 7 trolls, I think. She's healing, but it's slow. Well, like the title of this fic is. It's the long road to true happiness. And you have to have these dark periods in order to understand what true happiness is, I believe. And Branch is with her every step of the way, and he's doing so well to help her heal. Giving her a gentle push, but not shoving her to feel better immediately. I really appreciate that. Branch is doing a brilliant job here. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and albino pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.